So thanks for joining us today. We're going to run through our P6-Scrubber. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you today from Calgary. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. And doing the heavy lifting, Sue's going to show us the software in detail, is Sue Familia joining us from Wyoming. And she's an implementation specialist with Emerald. So let me run through some of the common struggles that people have with P6 and why we built the P6-Scrubber. So if you have a team that has a variety of users, but they're not all logged into the same database, you usually end up having to do imports, exports, that sort of thing. So as soon as you do that, you open yourself up to all sorts of struggles. So let's first talk about how you deal with outside users. Do you do XERs? How do you do that? So when you receive an XER, you could end up getting all sorts of different codes, UDFs, things that you didn't necessarily want in your system. So people get very creative, as they always do, to find a solution. So some people open up that XER because it's basically a text type file and start editing it. Now we've seen very, very dangerous things happen with that, so that's an option. It's not a good option, but people do it. You import and then clean it up, which is also a pain in the neck, and it's time consuming, and you can make mistakes there. And then some of our clients have a secondary database. They bring XERs into that and they do the scrubbing in there. Okay, so a few people decided to put some answers in here, so I'll go ahead and share those with you. So these are the reasons, part of the reasons we built the scrubber, because we were helping clients with scrubbing these databases. And we said, there's got to be a better way, than spending our time doing this. So the scrubber, and Sue will show this to you, can actually deal with XERs as well as XMLs. So we have two different methods of exporting in P6, so both XERs and XMLs. And it will also take care of Microsoft Project XML files. The idea here is we're trying to keep our P6 system clean, not pollute it with all sorts of stuff from other people's databases, and also not only pollute it, but also clashing. Okay, so you could get clashing or overwriting, which is a really potentially big problem. And Sue will talk about how we deal with that. The other thing that we find is we have clients that have very specific requirements of how they want the P6 used, okay? What codes, what user-defined fields, they have very specific requirements. And more we're having this take place because more and more of our clients are using things like our P6 reporter to do corporate reporting out of P6. In which case, you want to make sure your codes, your user-defined fields are nice and clean. They're not changing every few days because of imports or getting messed up because of imports. So there's that aspect of P6 usage. More and more rigor is taking place now in P6, which is because we're adding on dashboards and reporting to the system. That is not just project specific, but also corporate specific. So let's ask another quick question. Oops, sorry, my mistake. I clicked on that too quickly. So how much time do you spend doing the scrubbing each week? Now, or each month? That's going to depend, of course. So we have some clients that actually import over 50 projects a month, twice, usually every 2 weeks. They're doing a review of the updates. So the amount of time you spend, of course, depends on your process. But what we're trying to do is give you tools that allow you to do more updates more often. This is hugely important because if you can get your updates in more than once a month, and if you're doing them monthly, the data you're using in those updates could well be old. It could be 2 weeks old. So you could be working with 6-week-old data, which is not the best. So we're trying to give you the benefit of having better data available more regularly with these sorts of tools. So this is one of them. We've got many updating tools. We've got our P6 loader, which allows you to push and pull data in and out of Excel. Again, we're trying to get you tools that allow you to do more updating more often, because that gives you a better set of data when you're making decisions. And I mentioned the reporter tool lets you get that data in a snapshot, push it out to Power BI, Tableau, whatever your corporate tool for dashboards are, so you can make better decisions. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And P6-Scrubber is part of that toolkit. So how does this thing work? Well, Sue's going to show it in action, but it's very simple. It's a very simple tool. So you have a file, you have the files imported, and then you select your scrubbing features, okay? It's a saved file, and you've got all your definitions in that file. So the time-consuming part is to get that set up usually in the first pass. Once you've got that, you've got it set up, and then you just revalidate, because of course things could change. They could add codes, they could add UDFs, etc. So you validate that you've got your settings correct. It will also clean up some of the pesky things that we've had over the last few years, with POBS tables being massive, risk types being massive. So it will take care of those things. And you can also validate things like calendars. I mentioned UDFs and codes. You can validate and scrub and remap at all the different levels. So projects, activities, resources, etc. You can also deal with cost accounts. And then we have some additional validations, and Sue will show you those in action. Okay, so let's turn it over to Sue and take a deep dive as to how this tool works. Let me switch it on over. And it should be coming your way now, Sue.
All right, I got it. Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm going to share my screen so you can actually see what I'm going to show you while I'm talking as well. So the first thing I would like to show you is, just some of the things that can occur when you import files without kind of cleaning them up. So first of all, I have my resource dictionary up right here. And when you are importing and you have resources that are coming in, what you can see is that if you don't have a place for those resources to fall, what happens is they start to just be added to the end of your dictionary. So you can see these ones down here that are not in a hierarchy or anything, and they go on forever. These are resources that were imported with a file without having anything defined as to where they were going to land, where they were going to fall. Another risk with importing those resources is that if that resource happens to have the same resource ID as an existing resource that you have in your dictionary, what that's going to do is it's going to overwrite that information for that resource that you already have. So if their rates are different, if there's maximum units per time that are different, that's going to overwrite that resource definition, if you will, and it could greatly alter how your application of those resources is being affected. Some other ways that can be kind kind of a pain, I guess, is that you could end up with a calendar pool at the global level, much like this one. You can see this is huge. And ideally, in your global calendars, these are calendars that your organization would be using for your projects. And although, you know, you need to have calendars for your other projects that are importing as well from others, you don't necessarily have to have that at your global level. Those could be pushed to the project level, still be used on the project that you're importing, and you don't end up having kind of this pollution, if you will, in your calendars. Now, one thing I do also like to point out when we're here is that just about everyone has a standard 5-day work week calendar. That calendar does come when you actually get P6. Now, that doesn't mean that someone hasn't gone in and altered what the definition again is of this calendar. If you have altered it, or if someone else has altered it and you've imported it, what that would do with that importing of that calendar is it is going to overwrite what your definition of that standard 5-day work week is. So if you have a calendar that has the same calendar name as one that you're importing, the one that you're importing is actually the calendar that's going to be overwritten written over your existing calendar of the same name. So it's something that you really want to be careful with, because again, that can really harm the integrity of your schedules if that calendar is not the same. Other areas, let's say global activity codes. So if I go into my global activity codes in this database, I have a whole bunch of them. And if I sort them, I can see that I have several that have prefixes on them, indicating that maybe that's probably another company's activity codes. And again, this list is just enormous. I've got activity code over activity code over activity code, and some of these ones with numbers that may not mean a darn thing to me, but because I've imported those in without rolling them down to the project level, they are actually coming into my global activity codes, and it's not necessarily something that you want to have in your database, to have that abundant amount of activity codes that are out there. So just some of the pitfalls. Another thing is that when you are importing, let's say an XER, and you're going to go through and do your import. Oh, let me get this match. Let's see, create. I'm just going to ignore a couple of these so we can go through and see how we can since I'm not actually going to do the import, I can do this. But you do have some options on your import on what you can do with some of that data. However, if you look in the XER area here, you can see that it doesn't deal with anything like resources and where they're going to land, or for that matter, any activity codes that are at the global level. So, I mean, although P6 has a few things that you can handle while you're importing, it doesn't include every piece of information that you might want to handle within your P6 environment. So just some of the things I like to point out while before I get into the tool itself. So I'm just going to get another P6 coming up, which is actually my demo P6, because that other one is kind of messy.
That's an understatement.
Oh, it helps if I get my correct thing in here. But yeah, that is a very old database that Emerald has had for quite some time. We don't use it anymore, but it is a good example as to what can happen, because as you import all those projects and things, you really can get a very messy database that just is really hard to work with. So P6-Scrubber, as I go in here, essentially, I'm going to show what is called the live version. And I'm not sure we have any clients who actually don't use the live version. We do have a version that does not hook to your database. But ideally, if you hook it into your database, if you point it at your database, you're able to see what is actually in your database as you're scrubbing these files, so that you can tell, okay, do I have this code? Is it the same code that this file is actually giving me? So you can point it at more than one database when you're going in. So you would select the database that you're going to import the file to and simply sign in. Now, we have several topics that are along this left-hand side here. And these are all pieces of information that you can actually handle when you are in P6, or in P6-Scrubber, excuse me. So we'll just start going down the side here. So we've got this ID and name, and that's both at the project and the activity level. But the idea of this is if that you do have specifications that perhaps a contractor that's going to be sending you a file needs to adhere to on either the ID or the name, that you can set that up. And if we have time later, I'll kind of show you that. But essentially, you set up your ID pattern and your ID name, and what that does is it goes out and it checks if it matches the pattern that you've set out in your specifications. Now, with codes, we have codes at the project level, the resource level, the activity level, and we have some things that we can handle here. So essentially, with every module that you would like to run on your file, first of all, you're going to enable it. By default, they're turned off because you may or may not want to handle certain pieces of information. So you enable it, and you can start actually defining what you want to check on your project. So with activity, or with codes in general, what you can do is, I just clicked that for no apparent reason. You can add manually. So this is what you would do if you had the standalone version that was not connected to your database. You would add, and let's say you did we have a code called vendor. I would say, what type of code is it? Is it a global or is it a project code? If it is a project code, what project ID does it belong to? And then what do you want to do with this particular code if it's encountered in your XER? So you could either scrub it, meaning remove it from your file, or you could keep it. Now, as I go along, it's going to ask me, okay, so if I wanted to remap this, what would I want to remap it to? And I don't really want to remap it, but I do want to check to see if it's in my database. So if I open this up, I can start typing, and I can see that I have several vendors out here, but the vendor I want is actually this vendor here. So when I select that, it's going to tell me that, yep, here it is. We have a match in P6. So in my database, I have this vendor. Now, if I don't have this connected, I won't get anything in this matches P6 area. So let's say I'm not connected. I then want to open this up, and I'm probably going to want to be putting some dictionary values in here. But I don't necessarily want to add them one by one. I could use this add button. I could line them all up and I can add them one by one. But a lot of times we have dictionaries that are very large. So what can happen is that if I wanted to go to the dictionary in my P6, so this is the P6 that is connected to my, my database here. I could get all of my values. I could copy them, go back to P6-Scrubber, and I can use this bulk edit here. So with the bulk edit, I would open it up. I would paste my copy that I just did from my P6. I don't need this color, so I can remove that column. And then I could tell it to apply that, and it's going to bring in all of my values for me. Then I can continue to select my action, check if I have values in P6 if I'm connected, and so on and so forth. So this is how you would essentially start setting up data in P6-Scrubber. Another couple of options that we have on the pages, depending on what type of data it is. We can scrub extra code types. We could also scrub extra UDFs as well, and I'll go over each one of those. But when these are marked, what that tells P6-Scrubber is that if I have anything that is not defined in the table below, so let's say in my values table, this is a finite group. I don't want anything else to come in to my dictionary. I could say I want to scrub anything that's extra that comes in. So if there happens to become a new value in for that dictionary, it's going to remove it and not import that into my database. And that's going to happen at both the values level as well as the codes level. Now, we also have a feature here that if any extra code types come in, I don't necessarily want to get rid of them, but what I want to do is I want to roll them down and make sure they're at the activity level, because I can do that with my activity codes. So I can see that right here in this or this row here. I have a roll down, and if I would like to roll down a code in my table, I simply need to check mark that, and it's going to roll that code down. Okay, so this is all fine and good. You can set up all of your definitions like this. However, an easier way to set up your definition is to, and I'm just going to blank this one out for now. The way that I would get a blank brand new canvas, if you will, is to go into my Scrubber save and load definitions and go to a blank definition. And that's essentially just going to wipe out any information I had defined. But what is easier to when you're building out your definition is you may want to import a file that you already have. So I have an XER here, and I am going to import that actually into P6-Scrubber. What this is going to do, it's going to go out and it's going to pull all of those pieces of information that I can handle with P6-Scrubber and put them in my area here. So as I go in and I take a look at these, I can see that, you know, I've got information that I can handle. So it looks like with my project codes, everything looks pretty good. I'm going to enable this, but I don't want any other additional project codes to come in. So I'm just going to I'm going to tell it, scrub all those extra code types. And then I would go in and take a look at the rest of what I might want to do. Now, as I go down into my user-defined fields for my projects, this is project level and WBS level project codes, or excuse me, user-defined fields. I can see that the majority of them match, but I have this WBS code here because it's showing me my subject area. It's telling me that it doesn't have a matching value in my database. Well, that makes sense because my organization doesn't use WBS codes. So I'm just going to go out and I'm going to say I want to scrub that WBS code. Again, it's going to remove my X and say that it's not going to bring it in. And then I could also decide, at what level, how I want to handle each extra user-defined field that I bring in. So at the project level, I could choose to not bring any other project level user-defined field in, or any project or any WBS level. So I don't want to bring any WBS levels in. So I'm going to say scrub any of those that come in addition. I also have this last one here, and this is called submittal date. And I do have a submittal date in my P6. However, this is a file that is mapped to something else. I don't want it to come in and populate the submittal date field when it comes in. I can go out and I could find the actual area that I do want to bring it into. And so instead of submittal date, I want to bring it into this SCR submitted date. So essentially what that's going to do is it's going to remap my submittal date user-defined field and rename it to SCR submitted date so that it goes to the right place when I import this file. Codes and user-defined fields are throughout resources and activities and projects. So they all work similarly. Now, when I go into my codes here, I can see that I have some things that are not matching up. I've got a few different icons as well. So you see, as I hover over these, the information that has yellow markings on it, when I hover over that, it's going to show me kind of some coaching. What's wrong with this particular section here, or this particular piece of data? So this one is telling me it can't found it. Yeah, can't found. It didn't find a matching item in the database, but there's something similar that I might want to take a look at and see if that is where I want to remap it to. So when I do that, if I go into my mitigations here and I click in this field, that's going to show me the similar one that is there. So if it's something that yes, that's where I do want it to remap to, I can select it and it will remap. Now, I can do the same with this discipline. And let's say, none of these disciplines are the ones that I need. I could choose to scrub it out. And again, my light bulb is going to go away. Now on my work type, I look over here and I see that there's an issue with it, but it's not that it doesn't match. It's not that there's not an activity code called work type. But what is in here is that when I hover over it, it's telling me my dictionary is not matching. So if I go into my dictionary here and open it up, I can see specifically which ones are not working. So I could choose, maybe I want to scrub one. Maybe this type is not, maybe I need to remap it to something, I could delete this out. I could see all of my options that are here for this, and I can choose those. And it looks like I did that backwards. So I have I want to remap it to my AD, and then I want to give it the same description. So it's going to coach you as you go along, help you out with some of these things. Now, resources. Resources, we are able to remap our resources in P6. Now it's, or with P6-Scrubber. Now it's not going to remove resources because resources are potentially important to a file that you're getting in. But we can remove resources in a different place, just not here. So I'm just going to visit this one for now. So I can go and I can see that I've got maybe a match here. So I'm going to go in and take a look, and I have a few that I'm just going to remap. And then I can go and I can look at the rest of them. So with my remapping on my resources, if I chose, let's say I don't want this barricades to be barricades. Maybe I want to change it to SCR barricades. Well, okay, no, I don't, because I already have that in there. You can tell I've done this a few times. So let's say we call these, I want to call these Sue barricades. Now it's going to say that it's not in my database, but I want to allow with this import, I want P6-Scrubber to keep this in there and allow it to be created in my database. The way that I do that is on this matches P6, I can click in here, I can give it an OK, and it's going to give me a blue star indicating that I have told P6-Scrubber I don't want it removed. It's okay that it doesn't match my database. I want to create this in my database when I import it. So that's how you kind of get rid of those other, if you're wanting to actually allow data to come in and you want to create it, you realize that it does not match. That is how you would essentially make that red X go away, is that you would acknowledge that, yes, I did take a look at this and it is okay that that comes in. Again, codes and UDFs. We also have the ability to do units of measure. So I'm just going to put an example here. So let's say I have cubic meters that are in my unit of measure dictionary. And I call it cubic meters. Now, as I'm going along here, and let's say this got imported in with this project. I don't know, have an example on this one, but I do want to show you. It's telling me that this can't be blank here, for one. And as I go into my abbreviation, when I start typing, I can see that I don't have a little m large with a 3. I have a capital M with a 3. So I can kind of check myself as I go to make sure that what I'm putting in is correct when I do that. So we can do units of measure. Oh, on the resources, I did not visit this piece. When you have your resources that are coming in with a file, what you can do is you can also use this area where it says resources here, and you can open up and see all of the parent resources you have available in your database. So if you wanted to import resources into a particular resource tree, you could certainly do that. You would just go out, you would, let's say I want to put it in the SCR one. You could choose that resource tree that you want to put it into. And when you import the file, they're all going to fall underneath, in this case, because I selected it, it's going to go into this Scrubber testing resource parent change. So it's also going to allow you to decide where your resources are going to land when they are imported in. Calendars. Calendars are here, and we have global level calendars. Now with global level calendars, I kind of told you the pitfalls about that, overriding, getting a whole bunch that you really don't need for your organization. So chances are you're going to want to roll those down. So you have that ability to decide what you're going to do with each one of these calendars as you are working with them. So I've chosen to roll all of these down. These are defined. However, I could check mark my roll down extra global calendars so that if I am scrubbing another project and it has additional global calendars, it's going to automatically roll those down for me. At the project level, this is informational only. We had a client who wanted to see calendars that were coming in at their project level. They had some specifications and some project calendars that they were expecting from contractors, and they wanted to see them prior to importing them into P6 itself. So information only, no changes done for project calendars. Resource calendars. Again, I could remap this. Let's say I have another resource calendar that is supposed to be used for the resources that are coming in for this file. I can remap that to that resource calendar, and that will occur at my resource calendar level. I can handle notebook topics. A lot of times you're importing a schedule, and they have a bunch of kind of useless, meaningless notebooks in there that you don't necessarily need to see. You don't need to bring in those notebook topics that are coming in with that new schedule. And so you can handle those notebook topics as well. So if you use notebooks extensively, if you have a whole bunch of extras in there, it really can become kind of a pain, if you will, to have those additional ones in there. So you can choose to, scrub them out, keep them, whatever you would like to do with those notebook topics as well. Roles, these work just like the resources do. You can put them into a resource tree, or excuse me, in a role tree in this case, just by opening up and selecting the tree that you would like it to import to. And then you can go ahead and remap, rename, what have you with any of those. And I'm not going to go through all of those right now. You can also handle cost accounts. You can choose to keep them. You can scrub them out, and then remap as well. Now, OBS. When you are getting a file from elsewhere and you are going to import that into your database, what happens is that OBS or responsible manager comes with that schedule. So when you import that, what happens is that OBS element gets created in your database. So what you want to do I would say in all cases, but of course in the majority of cases, if not all, you would want to maybe reassign that responsible manager for a responsible manager in your database. So with that OBS, you can do that here. So if I wanted to go down and I was going to import it into my P6-Scrubber EPS node, and I wanted that responsible manager to match when I imported, number one, I'm not going to import anything that I don't currently have. And number two, I don't have to go and reset that responsible manager once I've imported the file. So I can choose that here and land that in my database and have the right responsible manager on it from the get-go. Now, this final section here is called Simple Scrubber. Now, this is a piece where you can do some kind of quick and dirty cleanup of a file. What this allows you to do, it doesn't have very much control except for an all or none type of thing. So I can choose to have a common prefix separator. So if I wanted to prefix my data coming in with let's say maybe a contractor name or a contractor ID of some sort, I could do that and prefix it, and I could put a dash between my prefix and whatever piece of information I'm bringing in. Let's say I want to prefix my project code types with SCR. And maybe I want to do that with my activity codes, my resource codes, and my role codes. Now, I come down to my resource assignment code type, and I really just don't want those in my database. I don't want to bring anything additional in, and they're really not important to the project. So I can choose to remove them. Now with my calendars, what I could choose to do, and I can do this as well on my global activity codes, is I can choose to either not import them or I can choose to roll them down. I can also choose my UDF types, my roles, my resources, etc. Now, remember, I said that you couldn't remove resources or roles in my categories up here at the top. However, in this particular area, I can remove these. So for those of you who are actually sending your projects or your files out, and maybe you don't want to include this type of information with your project, say you've got some costing or something on those roles and resources that you just it's not something that you need to share, and you don't need to give them a resource loaded schedule. You could choose to just not include those in your file, and you could remove them. So not only is this tool beneficial for those receiving schedules, but it's also could be beneficial for those sending their schedules out to other organizations. So once I have my definition all set up here, I would want to save it so that I can use it to scrub my file. So I'm going to go to the Save and Load Definitions, and I'm going to do a Save As here. So when I do a Save As, it's going to ask me, what do I want to name it? And I could put notes in. So if I wanted to kind of describe what this is, maybe it's for a particular company and I want to be sure that I kind of do a few notes in there, I could certainly do that. And then we have this ability to put it at a certain level. So I can create it personally for me and only me. I could make it a global, if I'm an administrator, I could make it a global definition for everyone else who uses P6-Scrubber to use. And an additional area that I could put this to is to a team. So if you have particular teams that work with maybe one contractor and you wanted to share across several people in your area who also work with that same contractor, you could set them up and put them on a team, and then you could share just to that team. So let's say I want this to go to my ABC contractor team. Then everybody who is part of that ABC contractor team can now see this definition and be able to use it. So I'm just going to do this as a personal one, and I'm going to apply. Now, if there's any problem with your definition, say you haven't handled information that you needed to handle, P6-Scrubber is going to come back before it saves it, and it's going to tell you, hey, you didn't deal with all of your activity codes, and you said you wanted to deal with them. It's going to come up and it's going to give you kind of a warning there, and not save it and have you go back and fix that and handle that information prior to allowing you to save that definition. Now, when let's say you've gotten out of P6 or P6-Scrubber and you've come back in and you don't really need to set up a definition. All you need to do is scrub a file. Again, you would log in, you would come to your save and load definitions. You would choose the one that you would like to use to scrub the file, and then you would load that. Now, in my case, I'm going to use this webinar example, and I'm going to scrub my file with this definition webinar example. I have it applied, and so I'm going to go down and I'm going to say I'm ready to scrub a file. So I'm going to go to Scrub Files. I'm going to browse out and choose the file or files. I can do more than one at a time. I could, grab several and scrub them at the same time. And then I could open that up, and you can see they're lined up. So it's going to do each one of these individually. Now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go back and choose one and then tell it to process. So P6-Scrubber is going out. It's applying those definitions that I set out. And then the first thing I probably want to do, especially if this is a new definition that I've not, really not familiar with, or I want to make sure that it's working the way I want it to, I can go and I can view a report. So when I view a report, it's going to come in and it's going to give me some information about what happened during that scrub. So, source file name, definition, things like that in here. I have an overall area where it's telling me what happened during that scrub. So I have a summary. I can see, what was clean, what was not, easily by the red and green. I can find out, what was kept, what was removed, etc. Now, as I scroll down, for each one of my checks or modules, I can see that very easily whether they were clean or not clean. So let's say in the case of my project code type, I can see some changes were made because I have that red not clean there. So as I scroll down, the gray is what's in my definition. This is what I put in my definition. So those gray tables are showing me that. Now, when I get down to the color boxes, what that is showing me is what happened when this was run on my file. So I've got my everything looks pretty good, except for on my district here, it looks like I had a dictionary change. So you can see down here below, it's giving me my district dictionary. And these are only the values, of course, that are going to be in your XER. And I can see that when in the file itself, what happened is that that code value was DIST5. But in my dictionary, I actually called that D5. So I remapped that, and it's showing me here that it remapped it. Then as I go on down, I can see all the rest of my changes and a little bit more granularity. So for my user defined field, I can see where I scrubbed out that WBS code and I remapped my submittal date to submitted date. Once I'm satisfied with that, then I'm ready to download my results. So I go ahead and download my results, and they're going to come in or come out, I guess, in a zipped file. But so I'll want to extract this before I import in. But I get two files. I get the clean XER, and I can tell that it's clean because it has the date and time appended to it. And I also get an XML copy of that report that we just looked at. Now, this report could be beneficial If, let's say, you're working with a contractor that has specifications that you're wanting them to adhere to, you could copy and paste pieces of this report. You could share the entire report back to that contractor and give them some feedback on what you found with the file that they sent you. Maybe there's something that's off. There, in the case of maybe an ID, the ID is not matching what the specification is. So once you import, you're going to see a few things here. You can see that when I imported, I had some files that have come in and they've got some indicators on them showing me, what happened with my project codes. Oh, I can see that my project code types were changed when it was scrubbed. My dictionary, I had some dictionaries that changed, UDFs that changed. But in the case of my project name, boy, that's matching up, as well as my my project ID. My cost accounts were all okay. So this is going to give you a visual of what happened with the file when it was scrubbed. Now, in addition, we also have a report that is the same report that we looked at earlier that comes in as a notebook. So you can keep those changes with your schedule in case you have maybe claims or anything like that that you need to show some backup information for. You can see, okay, we did not change the data in this. All we did was change some values and things like that. So this is going to give you that that kind of accounting for that. Now, not only do I have these indicators at the project level, but I also have them at the activity level. So I can see with my activities here, my vendor code for each one of my activities looks like those were great. Those were clean. I have my work type area. Remember, I showed you that I had removed that XX work type. Well, that's been removed from my file, but now P6-Scrubber is giving me a warning. Hey, this no longer has a value on this particular code or for these activities. So you might want to take a look at that. I also have where I remapped some things. So I can see that my C was remapped. It's got a red X next to it. I had some discipline values that were removed, and it's giving me that warning again that those were removed. Looks like, I don't have any displayed here, but it looks like I had some changes for my user-defined field. My cost accounts are looking good, etc. So you're going to be able to take a look at this if you want for each one of these. Now, I can turn those off if I choose to do so with P6-Scrubber. I have this general area here, and by default, P6-Scrubber is going to include that notebook as well as those indicators. Now, if all I wanted to bring in was the notebook, I could certainly turn off my indicators. They will not be created when the file is scrubbed. Another thing for those who are sending out files, if you are working in a higher version database and you are sending it to someone with a lower one, let's say I am working in 22 right now, but I am sending it to somebody who has version 19. I can actually override that file version and make it version 19 so that when they import that schedule, it is at the right version for that import, and they don't have any trouble importing my file. So did I miss anything there, Nicole? I think I covered just about everything.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. So I'm going to send this back to Nicole, or actually, I guess she'll take it back.
Yeah, I'll take it back.
Let her wrap it up.
Thanks, Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do have any questions, throw them in. But I think the tool is relatively easy to use. If you're using P6 regularly, you probably understand why we've done this, and we've covered pretty much all the areas. There may be one or two little bits and pieces that we could keep adding to the scrubber, but with the different clients we have using it, we've added all the areas that they've been asking for. So I think it's pretty complete, pretty easy to use. And with the way the definitions work, you can share that quite readily with your team. So you could share it out with additional people. The scrubs really come through and explain quite well what's going on. So that I think works very well. Can we also scrub the risk categories as well? Yeah, so it's part of the way the tool works. It will take care of those POBS and the risk types that have been hanging around and being problematic for the last few years. On a good note, Oracle, I think, has that now fixed. In, I think, the last 2 versions, they've got the risk types not mucking up like they used to. So that they have made that better. And I think the POBS too is, in the last few versions, is no longer a problem. So that should start to disappear as people move to the newer versions. But until they do, it's still going to be a straggler thing. And yeah, the scrubber does take care of it. Okay, so some of the benefits. Time, obviously, that's the main reason that we built this, to try and get people to have less time dealing with cleanup, less time dealing with massaging this stuff after it comes in. So to preempt it, get it done in a simple format, and then you don't have to worry about that when it comes in. Also, the cleanup, a lot less dealing with cleanup time and time again. So that's an important thing. Hopefully you saw that it's quite easy to use, you know, with our flagging and the different coding, very easy, clear to use. So that's a benefit. It doesn't take a lot of training with our clients. We usually train them for a few hours just to run through how it works, help them get some of their standard definitions set up, and then off they go. So it's not a very heavy lift for our clients. Now, keeping your system clean is very important. It's getting more and more important, as I mentioned, with people using things like P6 Reporter to snapshot their data and then put it out to corporate dashboarding like Power BI, Tableau, etc. So you got to keep your system clean. And of course, the accuracy is hugely important. You don't want your calendars colliding. That can change the way the schedules actually show up. And it could also make you waste a lot of time trying to figure out why you've got a date that's not matching what the contractor has in their PDF, that sort of thing. So the accuracy, and again, saving time because you don't have any collisions in the way the data came in. Okay, so I think we've run through everything. Let's just see if there's any other questions. How can we clean the existing database if it's already polluted? So we have our P6 loader tool that we do that kind of work with. So if you do have a database that's pretty messy already and you want to get it cleaned up, definitely attend our P6 loader webinar and or reach out to us, because that tool lets us remap, clean things using push and pulls in Excel. We usually do that and push it into a brand new database, and then we archive the old one, and then you get going in a clean database and applying P6-Scrubber as a tool for your team. Then you can keep it clean. So that's usually how we tackle that. The price of P6-Scrubber, we sell it as packages of scrubs. And a scrub is each project that you import. When you import it, counts as a scrub. So if you're doing only a few of these, you could buy a small package, 10 10 scrubs. If you're doing quite a bit more, you can buy the standard package, which is, I think, 100 scrubs. If you're doing more, you can get a corporate package, and we've got a professional package in between. So the most expensive package is just the small one, might be $100 a scrub. And when you get into the corporate package, it's unlimited per year. And that might be only a few dollars per scrub. Okay, so it's well worthwhile because usually the cost of the team doing the cleanup is going to be higher than the cost of the scrub. And then you don't have your team wasting their time cleaning up. They're spending their time on more valuable things. So hopefully you saw something that could help your team today. We've got other webinars that run through some of our other tools, so definitely reach out, take a look at our webinar schedule. I mentioned a few of them in the session with P6 Reporter, P6 Loader for the cleanups. We've got updating tools, so taps and caps. P6 Loader is used for updating as well. And we've got other tools that help you add calculations, etc. So I have a costing webinar that I keep bumping. It should be next week. So you can see the sort of things we can do with our calculator tool. And we also have an auditor tool. So if you have a large team and working with P6 and sometimes things get deleted or moved, the auditor tool could be interesting. So take a look at our schedule. We've got a lot of add-on tools that could be valuable for you. And the idea here is to save you time. All our tools should bring you that value, save you time, save you money on your projects. So I don't